Hey guys, how you doing today? My name is Rebel Hayes, and what we're here for is to get that ultimate show car shine. The first thing I want to go over with you is the type of polishes, the glazes, and the things of that nature that you're going to need in order to do this. There's different buffing pads, there's different polishes, different compounds, and things of that nature. So the first thing I'm going to go over, first of all, is how to get the surface ready in order to even start. So what you're going to need to do is, what I have here is a bucket of water, just plain ordinary water, and what you'll need to do is get the surface clean before you even get started. So what we're going to do is just take a wet rag over it real quick, just like this. And notice now, the things that I'm going to try to do for you here is exactly explain how this show car shine should look. It doesn't matter what kind of car you drive. Every car is going to have orange peel in it. Absolutely every car that comes out of a factory that's been painted, every car that comes out of a body shop that's been painted, unless you specifically ordered no orange peel. What we're going to do here is, the first thing you want to have is a regular squeegee. That's it, just a squeegee, and you're going to want to have some wet dry sandpaper. And if you don't understand what wet dry sandpaper is, the best thing I can tell you to do is Google it or something of that nature. So what we'll do is, once the surface is clean, you'll get the surface wet. And by the way, this does work better with one of those spray bottles, but this is just for the sake of this video. We're going to get the surface of the hood wet. And what I'm going to start with is just your ordinary stuff that you can buy at the store. This is 1000 grit. It's 1000 wet dry, made by 3M. Nothing special. Just cut your sheet in half like that. That should be good enough. What you'll have, you'll need this wet block. Now, if you don't have one specifically like this, it's called a soft block, okay? You can use this block. This block is your ordinary bodywork filler, sand them down, touch them up type block. It doesn't matter. But this particular block, if you don't have one of these, you can use one of these. I prefer not to. What you would do is you would take your block and wrap it like this in the sandpaper, so that you've got something to sand with, basically. Now what I'll do real quick, since the surface is still wet, well, I need to put a little more water on it. Since that surface is still wet, I'm going to take and I'm going to go over it like this. I'll stop before I get too far, because there's a couple of things that you're going to want to really know. Because number one, you're not going to want to sand a whole lot on this, and your edges, these edges right here, if you're a novice at this and it's your first time starting out, what you're going to want to do is save those edges, because you will burn them. And you can use, depends on what you feel safe with, okay? You can use the wide tape, or you can use a 1/4 inch tape. But what you really want to do is, when you're buffing, you're going to want to stay off of these edges, because you will burn them, and you will burn them quick. They do not play. So with that in mind, keep your edges, keep all your edges. I mean, I'm talking any edge that you can think of that stands out, keep those edges covered up with tape, because if not, and stay away from sandpaper on these edges, because if you don't, you will burn through and you will need to paint. So with that in mind, what we'll do is go ahead and finish sanding this down. And this is how they get an actual show car shine. You're not going to see this in a whole lot of books or magazines or anything of that nature, because what it is doing is it's removing the orange peel and the residue left after the paint job. And what I mean by orange peel is I'll show you right here. It's not totally sanded down yet, so I'll squeegee this off till it's dry. Looks like I did take most of the orange peel out of it. But anyway, what you'll see, and you may not be able to see this in the camera, I'm not sure, but what you will see is like a orange texture to it. The orange texture will leave high spots and low spots, and what you want to get rid of is all of the high spots. What happens is you want to end up with just a smooth, slick surface. And it doesn't really take much sanding to do that. I started out with 1000 grit. What you can do if you don't feel safe with starting with 1000 grit, because I know how much orange peel and how many scratches are in this hood, so I can make the determination to use 1000 to start off with. But what you may want to do is use something like 1500 or 1200, maybe even 2000 grit. Now there are a lot of different ways of doing this. Not everybody does it the same way. You can use what they call an orbital sander. You can use an orbital sander with a pad like this. And if you've got an air compressor, more power to you. You'll be able to get it done a lot quicker, but also too, you'll not be able to tell how deep you're going. So there's a lot of different ways of doing it. This is just basically, I guess you could call it the poor man's way. This is the poor man's way of doing it. So
why do you have to go up to a higher grit? What's the purpose behind the higher grit?
A higher grit is in 1500 or 2000. Basically what you're doing there is, like, say for instance, I'm starting off with 1000 grit. All right? If I don't want to buff as hard or as long on it, what I'll do is I'll go to a 1500, because I know that if I'm going to use a 1500 grit, I'm going to be over it real quick, and I'm not going to have to buff as hard. I'm not going to have to put as much pressure on a particular area, and it's going to move more smoothly. The shine's going to come back a lot quicker. That's what it does. So you could actually take and buff 1000 grit out, and that's fine. But for the sake of this video, I'm not going to do that. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take it down to this 1500 right here, and we're going to, I started off, and I wouldn't recommend starting off with anything like 800 or 600 or anything of that nature. That's a little coarse, especially for a clear coat job or something of that nature. And also too, I wanted to express to you, like, to be able to tell when you're sanding on something and you know that the car either has a clear coat on it or doesn't have a clear coat, you really don't want to buff or wet sand on a car that does not have a clear coat on it, especially if it's a metallic, because you will, what is called, model the metallics. That means you'll turn them. And when you get it out in the sunlight, you're going to wish you really hadn't did that. So the way to tell is go down low on a fender and sand a small portion and let it dry. If the residue comes back white like this, see how that's white? That's a white residue. What that is telling me is that's clear. Somebody's put clear on that. So that means, okay, I'm going to make it shine like a show car. And that's basically what it is. But most of the time you will have cars with clear on them. They don't really do one-stage shots anymore. Most of them have clear on them, even coming from the GM, the Ford, or the Chrysler plant. They're going to have clears on them. And if you get it out of a body shop or something like that, you get your car back and you're not happy with it, and it's got dirt, and it's got fisheye, or it's got, you know, debris in the hood or in a fender, and it's just not the quality of paint job that you want back. Well, this is something that you can do. Just make sure they put clear on it, and you can wet sand, buff this out like I'm telling you, and you'll have a show car shine without a problem. So what I'm going to end up doing here is I'm going to go ahead and do a section of this hood, and then I'm going to go over the buffing techniques with you real quick. Another thing you might want to do is make sure you go in the same direction. It makes It makes a big difference when you're wet, or when you're buffing the hood or the fender or the entire car out. Because if I was to sit here and go in circular motions and then back this way and then back that way, what you're doing is you're actually creating scratches that are not going to be able to uniformly be taken out with the buffer. You're going to end up going over the same area more times than is needed. So keeping in the same direction is going to make your job a lot easier to acquire that show car shine that you want.
How hard are you pressing?
I'm not pressing really hard. Actually, the sandpaper in the water kind of acts like a vacuum. And it sucks the sandpaper towards the car, which in reference gives me a real good clean cut. And that's what I mean by clean is it's real important to make sure that you've got your surface clean before you get started, because if not, I tell you, just a little bit of dirt or a little bit of dust or something of that nature gets in this, it's going to cause 800, 600, 400, even 200, 220 grit scratches, and those are not going to be easy to get out. So I can't stress enough how important it is to make sure your surface is clean before you get started. Anyway, we're just about done with this portion of the hood. I'm going to go ahead and go over some of the techniques of buffing with you and the different types of pads that there are, polishes, things of that nature. That should be good enough with the 1000 grit. I'm going to take it down just a notch with 1500. So that I don't have to work the buffer in my arms as hard. This will take off graffiti, it will take off deep scratches, it will take down the orange peel. There's a lot of benefits to doing this, and depending upon what waxes you use after you're done buffing, you really don't have to worry about anything sticking to it. One thing I might want to mention is our sponsors for helping us do this, DishNetwork.ws. Visit them. They've been a great help. Alright, I've done that. Now I'll go ahead and what I'll do is I'm going to squeegee this area dry real quick. I've watched a lot of videos on this type of stuff, and I don't know why they just don't go ahead and show you how it's done besides just doing it. It made no sense to me at all. But anyway, once that area is dry, like that, you'll see it come back. It will be really, really dull. Okay? Now it is important to get most of the water off of your surface. Get all the water you can actually off your surface that you're going to be buffing. Because what that will do is actually create it easier for the compounds and stuff like that in your pad to clog up and burn the surface. So you really want to get it dry. Now it's important to use that tape. I'm not going to use it because I really don't need to. I'm not going to burn the edges.